Hi, my name is Lawrence Kubik. I'm 81 years old, what they would call a veteran, I guess, of the motion picture and television industry. I was 3 when my mother took me and put me on a Greyhound bus, and we came to California. And my father at the time, I think, was under contract to MGM as a dancer. LA in those days was like, obviously, uncongested, nothing what it is like today. I remember that, we moved around in a lot of different apartments we lived in. So I went to 5 or 6 different grammar schools. Then we moved to an area near John Burroughs, where I went to John Burroughs Junior High School, and Fairfax High School. And then after that, I had joined the military and spent 3 years with adventures with the Navy and the Marine Corps, and came back and began my life in the city, in the business. The motion picture business was started by people that couldn't work in other businesses. They were frozen out of all the big companies, as you know. So the Jews were either in textiles or they started the motion picture business. They started the concession business with popcorn. They started with amusement parks. It started with those one-reel flickers that were silent films. They started making those things. A girlfriend of mine brought me a script, a psychedelic Western, she called it. And the script was financed and developed for the Beatles. And they were committed to do the movie. I said to my friend, George England, who had produced Ugly American with Brando, he's a good friend of Marlon's, and he had said, this would make a great movie. And I thought about it, and I said, well, I think I want to produce it. I don't know why the hell I said that. So he said, well, okay, you can produce it with me if you really want to do this. So we went off, we made this movie, and Marty Baum and ABC Pictures financed it, called Zachariah. Well, at that point in time, we had to put the cast together. And there were a lot of rock and roll bands. And the director wanted the Grateful Dead. So we pitched the Grateful Dead, and the Grateful Dead invited me to, their agent invited me to come to a concert up in Sacramento. And strangest thing, this guy all of a sudden who was a sound engineer for him said to me, Lawrence Kubik. I said, yeah, it's me. He said, Stanley Owsley? He said, yeah. I said, what are you doing with the Grateful Dead? We were in acting class together at Jeff Corey's. He said, I'm their sound engineer. What he didn't tell me was that he was the guy who was mixing the acid for them. I went to the concert with the Dead, and I went to a party with them at their ranch, and that was the last thing I remember. I woke up like the next day, I'm in a hotel room, and in the next bed is their agent. Saying, what the hell happened? 2 weeks before the movie was going to start, their agent calls me up and says, the Dead can't do the movie. I said, what are you talking about? We're leaving for Mexico to start, shooting in 2 weeks. So we had to replace them. So we got Country Joe and the Fish. Joe Walsh was in it. So off we went to Baja California, Mexicali, and shot the picture. After the first week, we were a week behind. ABC Pictures were sending executives down to come to the set, and I thought for sure I was getting fired. So they called me into a meeting and said, I said, do you know why we're here? I said, yeah, to fire me. They said, no, we're here to fire George. So they made me fire him, which was my job as the producer. So I felt horrible about it, but I thought, great, I want to be a producer. Now I have to prove I'm a real producer. So I had to tell him that he couldn't direct the movie. They weren't going to let him direct it. So they started sending us film on different directors. And then they call me up and they say, we have this young director. We want you to see his film. Universal's going to put him under contract. He's going to be the next great thing. I said, yeah, okay, send me the film. So I go to this screening room to look at the film, and it's a guy walking down the road. He's not doing anything but walking down the road. So what's he going to say something? Is he going to do something? What's the deal? The movie was called Amblin. They said, you got to hire this guy. I said, there's no way I'm going to hire this guy. We're not going to hire this guy. Biggest mistake I ever made. Yes, it was Steven Spielberg. So I had to go back to square one, and of course it wasn't so easy because I had already got a chance to be at the top of the mountain and blew that. So word had gotten out that I was looking for a job. My partner at the time and I started our own agency. And we went on and started signing directors and writers and actors. And one of the first actors we signed was a young actor he was in a movie called Wards of Flatbush. And he said, I'm a writer too. I said, you're a writer? Bring me something you've written. So he said he wrote a couple of scripts, and I said, look, I've got a relationship with a friend of mine who's a producer at MGM. I ran Wards of Flatbush for them, and they saw this kid act, and they said, okay, we'll do this deal. So I started negotiating a contract for this kid on some script. It was called Hell's Kitchen, I think it was. And I get a phone call from Fred Spector, who was William Morris at the time, and he says to me, are you making a deal for this kid at UA? I said, yeah, why? He said, well, he doesn't own the script. So what are you talking about? So I've got clients that have an option on it. I said, you gotta be kidding me. They said, tell the kid to write something else. So he calls us up and he says, what about a guy who runs for, a cab driver who runs for mayor of New York? I said, no one's going to care anything about a cab driver. You got to come up with something better than that. So he calls me and says, the next day he says, what about a fighter? Because he had seen the Chuck Wepner fight on television. And I said, now you're on the right track. So what happened was he dictated the script to his wife, Sasha, and in a week he had a draft of the script. We went ahead and I negotiated a contract for him. And part of the contract was that we insisted that he had to appear in 15 days of production before they had the right to replace him. Well, they didn't want to do that. You know, they said, we don't give that deal to McQueen. I said, McQueen doesn't need it. They really love the script. I said, what does that mean? No, they really love it. I said, yeah, how bad do they love it? We love it for Jimmy Caan. I said, no, it's not going to happen. Either he does it or we'll burn it. So they agreed to do it. Well, that's how Rocky came to be. I worked with an actor named Fred Dreyer. Fred Dreyer's big success, commercial success at the time, was a television series called Hunter, which was a top 10 rated television series. Around this time, certain events had happened. There was a bombing of the Marine Corps barracks in Beirut. 200 United States Marines were killed. So I had an idea that we probably could make a film based on that. And New World Pictures financed it. We made a decision to take the crew to Israel. I figured if one place in the world are going to be safe with the security is good is Israel. And we shot in Tel Aviv and we shot in Jerusalem, and certainly one of the most beautiful cities in the world that I've ever been in. You know, it's phenomenal, Jerusalem is. We had a sequence of a family. In the opening of the picture, the terrorists invade an Israeli ambassador's house, and they machine gun his family. So we had to cast the family. And there was a little boy and a little girl. The little boy was, at the time, was like 10 or 12. So the Israeli casting person said to me, the boy that you're seeing, you should know that his father was killed in the Munich Olympics. He was one of the athletes that was murdered. So I got him one-on-one and I said, look, I know you want to do this, but I've got to ask you, are you sure you want to do this? Because you know what's going to happen in this sequence, in this scene. And he said, yes. I said, "You not going to have any problem with this at all?" He said, "No." I said, "Okay, well, if you're sure you want to do it, then I'm going to give you the chance to do it." I had a cousin who, he and his wife were Orthodox Jews. So they asked me if I would like to go to Orthodox services. And I said, well, okay, but I've got to bring my daughter with me. And I don't know how she's going to handle that. But my cousin's wife at the time said, she'll be with me, on the other side of the veil. So we went to I think it was the Henry Fonda Theater in Hollywood, where the services being held. I don't remember the temple that was holding them there. But the men were on one side, the women were on the other, and services, they went on for quite a while. It was over 2 hours, certainly. And all of a sudden I hear this patter of little feet running down the aisle, and all of a sudden this hand reaches up and tugs my coat. And I looked down, I saw my daughter. I went, "What is it, Chelsea?" She says, "I want to go home." Her experience is whether I would take her, during the high holidays, we go to temple. But I realized, if I was going to take her to temple with me, I was going to have to really manage the time. So I decided to take her to child services. So I took her to child services at the synagogue on Burton Way. And, we were sitting there, and the rabbi came. It was a woman who was the rabbi, and I thought that would be an interesting experience for her to have a female rabbi do the services. And a half hour, they sang a couple songs. She said a prayer. She said something to the kids. And then she said, "Now we conclude our services." And we walk outside. My daughter says to me, "I really like that, Dad." I said, "Really?" She says, "Yes, it's a great thing, drive-through synagogue." I'm a recent grandfather. And the time I spend with my granddaughter, it's just pure joy for me, And when she looks at me, it's kind of like, I light up. She smiles, she knows me, she knows my voice, she communicates with me, she's trying to talk to me. I mean, it inspires me. I think that it would be my pleasure to one day take my granddaughter to drive-through synagogue.
This town has always needed some good music.
Yeah, really. Music? Call this dumb, stupid noise music?
Oh, come on. What are you talking about? They're good.
They're lousy. You weirdos are all alike.
Well, if you don't like it, mister, why don't you leave? Come on, cut it out, man. Let him be.
That's right, Matthew. Let me be.